I'm Dr. John Scharfenberg from Loma Linda University, and I want to talk to you a little bit today about foods that increase cancer risk. We've before in the past talked about foods that reduce cancer risk, but we also have good evidence on foods that increase cancer risk. Now, there's dietary factors which can increase cancer risk. What are they? Well, there could be the chemicals in the food themselves. Could be because of the high fat content of the food. Could be a lack of fiber in the food. Maybe the food lowers the body's resistance to cancer. Maybe the food changes the hormonal balance and results in early maturation, which could increase cancer risk. So these are some of the factors where food can really be a problem in helping to cause the cancer. Now, we've looked at animal fat as a big factor. In one country, they checked and they saw they had a lot of colon cancer. In that same country, they would have a lot of breast cancer, a lot of prostate cancer. It seems like these cancers go together with some factor that seems to put them all together. And we've been thinking in the past that maybe it's the animal fat which is that factor. Now, we know with meat, it has all the factors that we know help to increase cancer risk. Whereas the plant foods have all the factors which we know about that reduces cancer risk. Now, meat, for example, around the world, breast cancer correlates with the use of meat. We have studies which show that eating meat once a week increases the colon cancer risk 2.5-fold compared to the vegetarian. And so that's another factor. Prostate cancer risk is 3.6 times higher in those who are high consumers of meat, milk, eggs, and cheese. Of course, one thing we know there is the calcium increases the risk, the calcium from the milk. Ovary cancer risk is increased by use of meat. Intestinal cancer, ovary cancer, prostate cancer, all increased. In a study of over 20,000 people, red meats correlated with lung cancer. Now, you don't think of that very often, but it appears that maybe the saturated fat has something to do with this too. But red meats correlated with the lung cancer mortality, but dairy foods did not correlate. They had an inverse association. In other words, the more dairy, the less cancer problem. Now, it's the blood in the meat is a problem. The heme iron, that leads to the formation of a highly toxic factor in the colonic lumen that increases colonic epithelial proliferation, which increases the risk of cancer. It is suggested that is the heme in the meat which is causing the colon cancer. And we know it also increases risk of type 2 diabetes and 60% higher risk of heart disease from the heme iron. Heme iron correlates with heart disease better than meat does itself. In a large study in Japan of over 300,000 people, pancreatic cancer was 2.5 times higher in those who were high meat users. Now, one thing that in the U.S. public health officials always warn people about is don't charcoal broil in your backyard. If you broil a kilogram of steak, you produce as much benzopyrene, which is a carcinogen, as in the smoke of 600 cigarettes. So public health officials advise against charcoal broiling. If you want to broil, use a gas broiler or something else, but not charcoal broiling. Now, we know that meat has to be cooked well. It really needs to be cooked well to knock out all the salmonella and the problems with meat. But on the other hand, we know that well-cooked meat, overcooked meat, well-cooked meat, increases the risk of breast cancer 8-fold in a specific genotype of woman. Animal studies showed it increased the risk 4.6 times in another study. The heterocyclic amines are formed at high temperature. Chinese women who smoke, for example, get more lung cancer than Chinese men who smoke. Now, why is that? Well, the Chinese women cook in a poorly ventilated kitchen. They're cooking the meat. Here's these heterocyclic amines coming off in the smoke. They breathe those in. We think that probably is the reason why they have more lung cancer than the Chinese men who smoke. Now we know meat increases the risk of obesity. Meat eaters are 2 to 2.5 times more likely to be obese than vegetarians are. And obesity, we know, increases the risk of many cancers. What about fish? A study was done at Loma Linda where more than 3 servings per week of fish, poultry, or beef doubled the risk of bladder cancer, regardless of whether the subject had previously smoked or not. And even white meat, fish and poultry, increase the risk of colon cancer as much as red meat does. So that's a problem too. Fish has been recommended to prevent heart disease, but I really don't think they have good evidence to base that on. It's very small studies. All the big studies showed that was not really true. Ashero's large study showed no fish advantage in heart disease, but showed increased risk of coronary bypass grafting in the 2 groups with the highest fish intake. Eskimos didn't seem to have any difference in cardiovascular disease risk, regardless of how much of these omega-3s they had from the fish. What about eggs? Studies have been done to show that ovary cancer is directly proportional to the amount of cholesterol in the diet. And so is intestinal cancer. And cholesterol is highest in egg yolk. You should give the egg yolk to the dog, let the dog have the problem instead of you. And it gives a good fur coat to the dog anyway. But the cholesterol in the egg is a problem. That's in the yolk. Now you can get egg yolks, you can get egg whites, so you don't have to have the yolk. So if you eat 2 to 4 eggs a week, the risk for ovary cancer was double compared to those who did not use eggs. Butter and cheese, because of the saturated fat, there is some evidence that increases some of the cancers. What about milk? Well, milk does increase the risk of prostate cancer. That's pretty well known. But it may decrease the risk of other cancers, so that it's back and forth on the milk issue. What other foods can increase risk? Well, peanuts. If they're not harvested quickly, they will be out in the field lying there and get mold. They get aflatoxin. That is a liver carcinogen. And so we measure how much aflatoxin there is frequently in this country, so it's fairly safe in this country. But in Australia, food company was ordering some of these kinds of products, rice and things like this, from Thailand, and found out it had very high levels of aflatoxin. Apple cider can have patchouli, an aflatoxin, because if they use apples that have been laying on the ground and have some mold, the aflatoxin can be in the apple. Salt, too much salt in one food can increase gastric cancer. Irritating peppers, those peppers that are cool to the hand but hot on the tongue, those are irritating peppers. And in countries where they eat a lot of those, there's a higher risk of esophageal cancer, upper GI tract cancer. So irritating peppers is another little thing. But the biggest thing is the meat. Now, water that's chlorinated, for example, does increase the risk a little teeny bit. 1 person more cancer death per million people. But if we didn't chlorinate the water, we'd have a lot more people dying from other conditions. So chlorination is still worthwhile, but we have to admit that some of those products from the chlorination do increase cancer risk.
Hi, I'm Marcy Horonis with Bowel Health. To see more videos with Dr. Schaffenberg in it, you guys should subscribe to my YouTube channel. We talk about a ton of fun stuff like healthy vegan recipes, product reviews, health and beauty tips, and so much more, and I want all of you to be a part of it. Let me know in the comment section if there's anything else you guys would like to see. Thank you so much for watching today, and we will see you next time.